First Things, episode number 5.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Trying to be perfect, we try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. Today, we are talking about specific ways to learn better. If you know of someone who might benefit from this, or people who want to help their children learn better, or to learn things for their job or their career, or if you are in college, please let people know about this podcast. I think it will help them greatly. Today is about unleashing the lion in your brain. I recently did a blog article on efficient ways to study and learn, which I'll post a link in the show notes. Now, I'm going to mention some things that I did mention in that article, but I'm also going to talk about some new things as well. This podcast will help you if you have children in school, or if you are learning something new in school yourself, or learning something new on the job. I think everyone will benefit from something that we will talk about in this particular episode. Now, if you aren't learning anything new, I do believe you will benefit from some of these things as well. And why is that? Well, because we are always learning. For example, new technology comes out. Facebook makes changes. I'm almost ashamed to admit this, but I just joined Facebook a few months ago. And I made a big joke of it, telling people when I joined that I couldn't believe they beat me to it. It's like I made it like it was some new thing, and they laughed. But I just hadn't had a need to be in social media and to tie in together. My wife has a Facebook account, and I would just look on hers. And I decided, hey, maybe it's time for me to join up the revolution of Facebook and join up with these things. But some of my friends on there were recently complaining about some of the changes that Facebook recently made. And this is just part of life. Microsoft or Apple updates their operating system. New phones come out. It's a never-ending cycle. We are always having to learn new things. And here's a well-known fact of life that helps if you just accept and not fight. That is, change happens. And either you can dig your heels in and with bloody knuckles attempt to not move while you get dragged into new areas of your life, or you can embrace that change with a sense of awe and excitement. You really do have a choice. And even if you don't like the change, there is still an adventure in it that is awaiting you. The change could be terrible, like the death of a loved one. The change isn't always good or welcome, but there is always hope, always growth and new life. There is always a new chapter after the last chapter ended. You don't have to like that a chapter ended. You just have to keep on reading. I want to ask you a question. When was the last time you intentionally learned something new? Treat your life as an adventure. Your life is an occasion. Rise to it. Read a new book. Sign up for a class. Mix it up. Do something to better your job, then turn around and do something radical like a podcasting class or a class on writing or learn a foreign language or a musical instrument. By the way, if you want to try your hand at podcasting, I highly recommend Cliff Ravenscraft. I'll put a link in the show notes for his A to Z podcasting class, along with a special code just for my listeners that will give you $500 off his 4-week course. Now, most other sites affiliated with Cliff only give like $100 off. I worked it out with Cliff, special arrangement to give you $500 off. All you have to do is use the code FIRST500, FIRST500 when you sign up. And by the way, he has a free video series on podcasting, which is excellent. It's really his 4-week class narrowed down to a few hours of teaching, but his 4-week class is amazing. Gives you one-on-one attention with Cliff himself. And you can actually take this course anywhere in the world. So some of my South America, Africa, European, Australian listeners, be sure to check that out too. But don't think you have to spend money to learn something either. Check out some books from the library, go on field trips, volunteer to worthy organizations like Habitat for Humanity. The point is this: as long as you have breath, learn something new. And for my listeners who have children, what better way to model this to your kids? Our children see how we live our lives, and possibly they can find more excitement in their schoolwork if they see in our lives this same passion to learn new things. Think about that. So why am I titling today's show Unleashing the Lion in Your Brain? Well, simply this: I think you should view your learning as a lion does its prey. You read up on lions. They hunt in the cooler hours. They are very patient. They pace themselves to seize the right moment. They move inch by inch, never taking their eyes off their prey. Now, we see lions usually only in zoos, and captive lions lie around looking bored, stirring only to swat a fly or to find some shade. They're somewhat unimpressive, to say the least, but a wild lion even may not seem much more impressive. However, that's because they do most of their work at night when no one is watching. Under cover of night, they become the greatest of hunters. Their tan coats become a natural camouflage. It blends in with the bush, so that even the male lion, which can weigh as much as 500 pounds and measure over 6 feet from nose to tail, is basically invisible. And using this camouflage to their advantage, lions stalk their prey. Because their top speed is not very fast over a short distance, they're not going to run down their food very often. Instead, they creep slowly toward their victims behind the cover of the tall grasses of the plain, and with a swift dash, they pounce upon their prey. They have excellent night vision. They have acute sense of smell and hearing to help them stalk under the darkness, and even to help their odds, they will usually hunt within a territory, roaming about with other company of lions. They're very selective hunters. They will often pick off stragglers, the old, the ailing. They will strike into the pack or herd if necessary, but they prefer everything in their favor. I want you to think of your brain and learning this way. The key is not to study hard and long, but smart. And like a lion intent and patient on its prey, you are intent and patient on learning. I've seen countless students passively pursue education. They attempt to cram the night before, which is the equivalent of a lion trying to outrun its prey instead of quietly, inch by inch, sneaking on their prey. How many students I've seen sit at the back of the class distracted by their phones, and every single student between me and them versus a student on the front row, no distractions, ready to pounce on knowledge. So the next time you learn something, imagine yourself as a lion, ready to pounce on knowledge. Patient, strategy, diligence, passion, purpose, quick wins, all traits of successful learning, and so intent that if you fail the first time, or the second time, or the third time, or the 100th time, you brush off the dust and you go right back at it. So I want to dive into some action steps, as always, to help you learn better. But before we do, let's briefly talk about what isn't working in our education system and in our own personal learning. First of all, homework. There's been some research in the Economics of Education Review journal that show that science and English and history homework typically have little to no impact on students' test scores. Math homework, however, does appear to make a difference, and I've pondered this. Why is this? And I think it's because most homework isn't geared to help students absorb, retain, or apply their knowledge. Math tends to be very mechanical, so it does often translate well between homework and tests. We need a different way to approach learning and homework. I'll tell you something else that doesn't work, and that is studying hard versus studying smart. Learning is often treated like the oil in your car. We pour into our memory banks all of these facts like a big storage tank, and then treat homework or tests like it's the dipstick that measures how much information we've put in there. Our dipstick or our test is low, or we fail, we conclude that we don't know the material. Or some of us maybe assume that we sprung a leak somewhere. But, we don't understand better ways to learn, nor how failure is often our best teacher. Something else that doesn't work, and that is studying everything at one time. Let's say you're studying something in history like the Civil War. Often in school, you will study that for a few weeks, and then you'll move on to the next topic like Reconstruction. Research suggests, however, that you're much better off being exposed to briefer sessions repeatedly. So instead of 3 weeks on the Civil War, you are better off being exposed to various parts of the Civil War over 3 months and constantly coming back to it. This is called spaced repetition. Yet sadly, most classes aren't set up this way. A study at the University of California found that 8th grade history students had nearly double the retention rate learning like this versus a single consolidated unit. Something else that typically does not work for us is tests. But what I say about this may surprise you. Tests are often used as the end-all or even sometimes, sadly, as punishment. I think some tests should be used to determine overall knowledge, but the majority of tests should be constructive, should be formative. That is, they should help guide a person into what they need extra work on. One research project found that students who read a passage, then took a test asking them to recall what they had read, retained about 50% more of the information a week later than students who just repeatedly studied the material with no testing, or even students who drew detailed diagrams documenting what they had learned, or sometimes known as concept mapping. That is fascinating. Students who just study the material solely, nothing else, students who mapped it out and took notes, did worse in retaining information than students who tested themselves after they read the material. Now, I'm sure someone's going to groan, not more tests. Please, no more tests. Now, I can understand that frustration, but keep in mind, I am not suggesting statewide tests nor even tests that count for a grade. I'm simply saying that we should use tests in our favor. And it doesn't even have to be written. Often when I'm studying something, I will stop and pretend I'm taking a test. I'll just start talking out loud, or in my head, I'll say, what if they asked me this? Could I explain this? What is the meaning of this? What do I think they might ask me about this? And I will try to be imaginative and create test items that I think someone would ask me about this. So why does this work? Well, we'll talk about this in a minute, but it's because I'm actively engaged. I'm not passively studying. Another thing that doesn't work for us is if it seems easy, have we really learned it? Here's the irony. The struggle to learn helps you learn, but it sometimes makes you feel like you're not learning. If you fail a test, you feel like you aren't learning, but you really are. You've got to keep after it. The problem is we have an education system and sometimes an educational government system that doesn't see the merit in failure. Failure is a bad word to many people. But as a math teacher for 20 years, I can tell you my honest assessment. The student that struggles fails, but never gives up, and finally one day gets it, always is stronger than a student that never struggled and aced everything. There is a depth of knowing that comes from failure. People like Michael Jordan, Einstein, Steve Jobs, all of them suffered incredible failure in their lives, yet they are known today because of their incredible success. Okay, I want to give you 8 action steps to take your learning to the next level. Whether your kid is in school, whether you are in college, whether you are training for something for your job, whether you're just learning something for fun, I think you could benefit from one of these 8 steps I'm about to detail for you right now. Number 1, embrace learning with passion and adventure. If you are learning something that is boring to you, you need to find a way to engage. Now, if you can't see the material as exciting, then you need to make the learning itself exciting. For example, making some nonsense sentences to remember things, or a song, or a game. Some of the nonsense things that you can make up sometimes are often referred to as mnemonics. And that is, those are usually good if you're trying to work out facts or orders. Like if you're teaching the colors of a rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, You can make up some crazy saying like, run over your granny because it's violent. And each one of those letters, beginning letters, represents the colors of the rainbow. Or how many of you remember from math the order of operations? Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. You make up a crazy saying like that and you can remember that very easily. Or how about this? Create a song. Who remembers Schoolhouse Rock? This was a cartoon which ran on ABC back in the late 70s. Listen to this short clip of a cartoon song dealing with the preamble to the Constitution.
In 1787, I'm told our founding fathers did agree to write a list of principles for keeping people free. The USA was just starting out a whole brand new country, and so our people spelled it out, the things that we should be. And they put those principles down on paper and called it the Constitution. And it's been helping us run our country ever since then. The first part of the Constitution is called the Preamble and tells what those founding fathers set out to do. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
I'll put a link in the show notes so you can listen to the whole thing. But if you make learning fun like this, it will stick with you. By the way, it doesn't matter how good you sing. The point is to make learning fun and give you a creative way to remember things. Now, we can go on, and maybe I'll create a blog post or another podcast to talk about this. But for now, the point is, make it fun. Number 2, quit highlighting. Research shows that highlighting text only delays learning, may actually be detrimental. Why is that? Because you aren't actively engaged in learning. There's a part of your attention withdrawn because you know you're going to study it later. I would spend such time making flashcards instead, or quiz yourself as you read. Write a summary of what you're reading in your own words, or use an app like Evernote to journal your thoughts, or an app like Anki to make flashcards electronically. In the time you highlighted something, you could have developed several flashcards that you could use daily to quiz yourself. And by the way, if you're just casually reading something and not trying to learn, I don't think highlighting is necessarily bad, but if you really want to learn something new, don't use this technique. Even apps like iBooks and Kindle allow you to make notes and not just highlight text. Number 3, remember that you cannot cram on the farm. Imagine a farmer waking up one morning and saying, "Oh goodness, I forgot to plant the crops and I need them tomorrow. Looks like it's going to be a long night for me." Now, what can you learn overnight? Very little. What can a farmer actually grow overnight? Very little. We all know this in life. You are better off studying something over multiple days than just once. Here's a secret that some have never thought of. You can apply the same technique when learning something in one sitting and recall more. Let's say that you have 60 minutes to study something. Now, most people will study for 60 minutes straight. Yet a more effective way to study would be to study for 15 minutes, then take a 5-minute break. Then repeat this. You will end up studying for 45 minutes, but remembering more than if you had studied for 60 minutes straight. Now, one key in this is when you take a break, do something to get your oxygen levels up. For instance, walk around the house or step outside and take a quick walk, or get up and stretch, but don't go and watch TV because this could potentially cause a greater hindrance, especially when you try to refocus again. And we'll talk about that more in just a bit. And also play around with these intervals and find what works better for you. You may find that you learn better by taking longer breaks the longer you study. And while I believe this way of studying works for everyone, the way in which you apply it effectively will probably vary by the individual. Keep trying out various ways of doing this until you find your magic spot. And by the way, I do believe this technique is a very good way to work as well. So even if you are not learning something, but you're just doing work at your job, I think it helps to not try to work for 2 hours straight in a row, but to maybe work for 30 minutes and then take a 5-minute break, and then work for 30 more minutes and take a 5-minute break. I think you will be much more productive if you do that, and that'll be a subject of a future podcast as well. Number 4, turn off distractions. Did you know there was a study done at Microsoft that intentionally distracted workers with email and instant messages and studied the effect? They found that it took an average of 15 minutes for them to regain their focus and return to the task they were doing before the interruption. Another study at the University of California found that office workers are typically interrupted roughly every 3 minutes, and it takes them about 23 minutes to return to the original task that they were doing. Yet another study at Carnegie Mellon found that interruptions were detrimental to the point of turning a B- student into a D- student. That is a drop of 2 letter grades, my friends. What you want to avoid is unplanned interruptions. Now, in my previous point, I recommended taking intentional breaks. What you want to avoid is unintentional interruptions, disrupting phone calls, text messages, email alerts, television, people talking to you or stopping to ask you a question, Facebook alerts, tweets, and so on. Imagine you are studying, and every time you are interrupted by your phone, it costs you $1,000. Ouch. That hurts a lot. But this is the very effect on your brain. It costs you a lot of time and energy and focus every time you're interrupted. Now, the easiest solution, just turn it off. That's all you have to do. Turn off the distractions. Turn off your email. Turn off your phone or put it into airplane mode. And by the way, research does indicate that listening to music is okay, but that same research also suggests that for most people, vocal music can sometimes be a distraction. If you find yourself paying more attention to the song than your studies, find different music or turn it off. There are some things that I have realized I must only listen to instrumental music to really focus. Research indicates that television is almost always a bad distraction, even if you don't watch the screen. Remember, each distraction costs you $1,000. How much are you willing to pay to get that email notification or that text message? How much worth is that to you? For me, I don't want to spend $1,000 to get a text message. I'm going to turn it off and focus on the task at hand. Number 5, treat learning like bodybuilding. You know, a person who thinks they can simply diet and exercise one day and lose 50 pounds by the following day and be ripped is delusional. And yet we sometimes forget that learning is no different. It takes patience and time. Remember what I said earlier about approaching learning like a lion, inch by inch, with great patience. You know, of all the students I remember teaching, one particular student stands out. His name was Gary. I was in charge of a tutoring lab which specialized in math, and Gary had just started college and had very deficient skills, so much so that he was placed in remedial math. And that was a class that was so basic that the state wouldn't even let it count toward a college degree. Now, Gary thought he would never get it. In fact, he would tell me, I've never been good at math. I just can't do it. But I started slowly, methodically, every day helping him, showing him how to do things, and then letting him try. Little success and then more failures. Some failures, some successes. Some failures, bigger successes, more failures. But I never gave up, and he didn't either. And during that time, I would constantly feed him new ways to see himself. Look at what you just did, Gary. You can do this. Or I would say, you are getting so good, you are going to end up taking calculus someday. Now, this wasn't me joking with him in a sarcastic way. I honestly believed he could. Now, he would laugh it off, but I would keep telling him stuff like this every week. He got a B in that course. Then he took college algebra. He made an A-. Then he shocked me and signed up for trigonometry. He made an A, and guess what? He ended up taking calculus and made an A. Now, why did he succeed? Because I'm a great teacher? No, I was just his coach. He succeeded because he piled on small wins after small wins, even in the midst of failures. He never gave up. It's like bodybuilding or running a marathon. He didn't try to run a marathon after one day of running. He simply started to walk step by step. And then after long, he ran for 5 minutes, and then he ran for 10 minutes, and then eventually he ran a 5K, and then eventually he ran the marathon. Don't give up. Believe in yourself in spite of failures. Failures don't mean that you can't learn something. It simply means you haven't mastered it yet. It never means you never will unless you believe that lie, but we'll talk about that more in just a bit. Number 6, engage in active learning. Research has repeatedly shown that we only remember about 10% of what we read, but we will remember 70% of what we say and write and 90% of what we do. You know, in the ancient world, they would never think you learned something by passing a test. That is something that is unique to our modern culture, to think that passing a multiple choice test means that you know something. In the ancient world, you knew something if you lived it. If a person said, I know something, another person would say, well, let me follow you around for a week, and then I will know what you know, because I'll see what you live, and that's how I will know what you know. Now, we all know this is true. Can you imagine saying that you learned to play the guitar, yet you never even picked up a guitar? You know, I love basketball. I love watching it, but who knows basketball? Me or LeBron James or Michael Jordan? Yeah, I may know some facts, but they can do it. Now, how can this help us learn? Simply that you need to get learning out of your head. You need to get it out of your thoughts only. The more your learning simply stays as thoughts, the less you will learn and the longer it will take. Get your body involved. Write it down. Say it out loud. Do it. Let's say that you learn about some form of poetry. Well, instead of just studying the facts about it, try writing something in that style. Instead of just studying pictures of a plant, if you're learning parts of a plant, go out and buy a plant and feel each part in your hand. Touch it as you study it. We mentioned this earlier, but things like Schoolhouse Rock. Create a song. If you read about Mac operating system, don't just read about it. Stop and practice and do it. If you learn the Pythagorean theorem, go out and build a small fence using the equation. Even if the fence is a total disaster, it doesn't matter. You're applying the knowledge firsthand. Put it into action. Whatever you are trying to learn, do your best to quit trying to learn it all by just thinking about it. Write it, speak it, do it. Number 7, change your identity. I think this is an action step in every single podcast I've done so far, but it is so true. If you think I'm no good at math, then guess what? You will expect failure, not success. You need to learn a new identity. This can be so ingrained in you, it might take months or years to overcome. But remember, step by step, small wins. For instance, with math, I have taught students that teachers have given up on as complete failures, and I saw them succeed, not because I'm an awesome teacher, but because I believed in them, and I didn't give up on them. I knew it was just a matter of finding their own ramp to build up enough small wins that they gained momentum. The only students I never was able to help were those who gave up, gave into their doubts and fears, and quit coming to me for help. I face this right now myself. I'm trying to learn Greek, and I have started a class for the last 3 years and never finished it. Because it baffles me how a person can actually know 2 languages. It really bothers me quite a bit how somebody can actually do that. And I've started this class and then I've stopped it. I've gotten behind. I would make progress and then I would get so behind and I would quit. But guess what? I won't accept failure. I am determined I will succeed. And I realized that I spent 5 years of my life as a child learning English before I ever started learning the rules in school. So I quit beating up on myself and realized it's just something that might take me longer than 4 months to master. Part of my battle, though, is to change my identity from the I don't see how I can speak 2 languages to the identity of I can speak 2 languages. It's just taking me a little bit longer than I thought. Don't accept labels put on you by other people and don't put them on yourself. I have a whole podcast dedicated to the topic of stinking thinking. I'll put a link in the show notes. I would encourage you to listen to that if anything I'm saying here resonates with you. But my main point is simply this. You can learn anything you want to learn. Do not ever limit yourself. Be patient, step by step, study smart, believe in yourself, and never accept any labels that you or others put on yourself. Number 8, and this will probably be the hardest for almost anybody or everyone, and that is embrace failure. Do you respond to failure with avoidance or curiosity? If you're like most people, you avoid it. And I'm not saying that failure is always nice and great and feels good, but it is something that you should approach from a different perspective. Given how failure is often a very painful experience, and that gives us feelings of uncertainty and self-doubt, it's understandable that our initial response is to avoid it, where we feel compelled to do whatever we can to prevent this from happening again. Unfortunately, this response often can stop us pursuing the course we've taken to ensure that we don't experience that difficult or painful outcome again. Now, sometimes that's good. When you accidentally touch a hot surface, you quickly learn not to keep touching it because it hurts. But we have to be mindful of how in other times it can actually impede us from learning more about what causes failure in the first place. Our failure can provide us with key insights that can help us move one step closer to achieving the goals that we were after. Give yourself permission to fail, realizing that this could be the very catalyst to your success. It doesn't mean that you are stupid or weak or incompetent. Failure is simply a time to reassess. I want to give you a very simple formula to success. Are you ready for this? Number 1, attempt it. Number 2, observe and learn. And number 3, repeat. Attempt it, observe and learn, and do it again. If you failed a math test, learn why you did. Come up with a plan and go after it again. Do not give up. You will eventually succeed if you just don't give up. Think of a baby learning to walk. How many failures they had before they finally learned to walk. They never gave up. No matter how much they fell, one day they finally walk. And you, my friends, I don't care what the task is, you will be able to walk as well, but you've got to consistently embrace your failures with curiosity and adventure, knowing that even in your failures, you're one step closer to success. Well, I hope some of these points helped you or helped your kids to embrace learning from a different perspective and to apply some of these techniques to your life as well. I want to give a special hello to new listeners in Puerto Rico, Canada, Austria, Bolivia, South Africa, and Mexico. And in the States, I've had listeners in almost every state except for 13 of them. Thank you to all of my listeners. In fact, I am currently number 97 in the top business podcast, which is amazing considering that I just started this less than a month ago. And I have you to thank for that. And by the way, I don't really care if I'm number 500 or number 1. All I care about is helping people. And I hope that you are finding value in this podcast. And please help me to spread the word for this podcast so that we can help even more people find value and passion and productivity for their lives. And if there are topics you would like to hear me talk about or people you would like me to try to interview, please leave me a comment and I will add that to my list of upcoming topics. Speaking of which, if you have enjoyed this show, please consider leaving me a rating on iTunes or other outlets that you are listening to me on. I, again, won't ask you to give me a specific rating. Rate me by the value that you're receiving from the show. I would appreciate rating the show with comments. It helps let other people know about the show. Lets me know what you're thinking as well. Now it's your turn. What are some tips that you've discovered that help you learn? How do you make learning more fun and engaging? What is something you can start learning this week? If you have any comments, I have a discussion area set up at firstthingsproductivity.com/05 as in episode 5. firstthingsproductivity.com/05. So until next time, remember this. Your life is an occasion. Rise to it. Choose to see your life as the amazing adventure it is, and that includes your learning. In everything, even what you consider the most mundane, choose to learn and see the beauty and the mystery of life. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't waste energy trying to cover up your failure. Learn from your failures and go on to your next adventure. Remember what Thomas Edison said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Embrace the day with passion and intention, and don't die with your music still inside you.